The alarm on my console screamed before I had even finished my coffee, and I knew this day would not end quietly. My name is Elias Voss, second in command of the human warship Reckoning, and the moment our sensors locked onto the station ahead of us, every hair on my arm stood up. We had jumped into orbit around Kethra 9, a neutral trading post run by the Galactic Council, carrying nothing but a formal request. Earth wanted a seat at their table. We wanted to be heard. That was all. But the reception waiting for us told a different story. 3 alien cruisers hung near the station like vultures circling a wounded animal, their hulls painted in colors that meant nothing to me but clearly meant something to them. My captain, Nora Whitfield, stood beside me on the bridge with her arms crossed, watching the same feed I was watching, her jaw tight enough to crack a tooth. "They knew we were coming," she said quietly. "So why does it feel like an ambush?" I did not have an answer for her. What I had was a growing knot in my stomach that told me this trip, months in the planning, years in the making, was about to go sideways in the first 10 minutes. A voice crackled through our comms, translated through the universal relay the Council insisted every visiting species use. It was flat, bored, almost dismissive, the kind of tone you would use to talk to a child who had wandered somewhere they were not supposed to be. "Unregistered vessel, you have entered controlled space. Identify yourself and state your business, or you will be escorted out." Escorted out, as if we were nothing, as if the ship carrying humanity's entire hope for recognition was some lost cargo hauler that had taken a wrong turn. Captain Whitfield keyed the comm herself, her voice steady in a way that made me proud to serve under her. "This is the United Earth Ship Reckoning, representing the planet Earth and its people. We carry a formal petition for the Galactic Council. We request docking clearance and an audience." There was a pause, a long one, long enough that I found myself counting the seconds in my head, 1, 2, 3, all the way past 20, wondering if they had simply muted us and moved on to more important matters. Finally, the voice returned. "Petition noted. Docking clearance granted. Escort ships will guide you in. Guide us in." I watched on the tactical display as the 3 alien cruisers broke formation and began moving toward us, not in a welcoming spread, but in a tight formation that boxed us in from 3 sides. I have flown enough simulations and studied enough history to know what that formation meant. It was not an escort, it was a leash. "Helm, hold position," Whitfield ordered. "Let them come to us." I leaned over my station, watching the cruisers close the distance. My hands hovered near the shield controls, not because I expected trouble, but because instinct told me to be ready for it anyway. That instinct had kept me alive through 2 tours in the outer colonies, back when Earth still had enemies closer to home than the stars. The lead cruiser drifted closer than any polite escort should, and I felt the Reckoning shudder as something scraped along our outer hull. Not a strike, not quite an attack, just enough contact to remind us who was bigger here. "Report," Whitfield snapped. "Minor hull abrasion, port side," came the reply from engineering. "No breach. They clipped us." I looked at my captain, and she looked at me, and neither of us needed to say what we were both thinking. That was not an accident. Ships with sensor arrays as advanced as those cruisers did not simply bump into each other in open space. That contact was a message, delivered in the oldest language there is, the language of showing someone exactly how much you do not respect them. "Do we respond?" I asked, my voice lower now, meant only for her. "Not yet," she said. "We came here to talk, not to fight. Let them have their little display. We will remember it." We would remember it. I did not know yet how much those 3 words would come to define everything that followed. The escort brought us into a docking bay large enough to swallow 10 ships our size, and as we settled into our berth, I got my first real look at the scale of what Earth was up against. Through the observation windows, I could see dozens of alien vessels, some sleek and fast, others massive and slow, all of them representing species who had been traveling the stars for centuries, some for thousands of years, while humanity had only just learned to walk among them. We were the newcomers, the unproven, the primitive. I had heard those words used to describe us before, in intercepted transmissions, in the careful diplomatic language of reports that tried to soften the insult but never quite managed it. Hearing it whispered in a report was one thing. Feeling it in the way 3 warships had just handled us like an inconvenience was another thing entirely. Whitfield gathered a small team for the meeting, myself included, along with our lead diplomat, a calm and careful woman named Priya Malhotra, who had spent the last 3 years studying every scrap of council protocol Earth's intelligence services could gather. She walked beside me through the station corridors with a tablet full of prepared statements, her expression unreadable, though I could see the tension in how tightly she held that tablet against her chest. "Remember," she said to both of us as we walked, "we are guests here. Whatever happens, we do not react. We observe, we learn, we ask for what we came for, and we leave." "And if they refuse to listen?" I asked. She did not answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice had an edge to it that surprised me. "Then, we learn exactly what kind of galaxy we are trying to join." The chamber where the council met was enormous, a circular room ringed with platforms that hovered at different heights, each one representing a different member species, each one positioned according to some ranking system that placed the oldest and most powerful civilizations closest to the center. We were led to a small platform near the outer edge, low to the ground, far from anything resembling importance. I counted at least 15 different species represented in that room, some humanoid, some so alien in shape that my mind struggled to process what I was looking at. All of them turned to watch as we entered, and the murmur that rippled through the chamber was not curiosity. It was amusement. A tall, thin figure near the center of the room rose to address us. His skin had a faint blue sheen, and his eyes were too large for his narrow face, giving him an expression that seemed permanently surprised, though his tone carried none of that surprise, only a practiced, weary patience. "Representatives of Earth," he said, and even through the translation relay, I could hear something condescending in how he shaped the word Earth, as if it tasted strange in his mouth. "The Council has reviewed your petition for provisional membership. Before we proceed, perhaps you would care to explain why a species so recently arrived to interstellar travel believes it has earned a place among civilizations that have maintained peace across this galaxy for millennia." Malhotra stepped forward, her voice calm and clear. "We do not claim to have earned anything through age or tradition. We ask for recognition based on what we have already accomplished, and a chance to prove our value as partners rather than outsiders." Another voice, from a different platform, laughed outright, a harsh clicking sound that needed no translation to understand. "Partners, your species has existed among the stars for what, 20 years? 30? You have not even settled your own conflicts within your single solar system, and you ask to sit among civilizations that have governed thousands of worlds." I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my mouth shut. This was not my moment to speak. It was Malhotra's, and she carried it with more patience than I could have managed. "We settled our conflicts faster than most," she replied evenly, "and we did it while also building ships capable of reaching this chamber. We are not asking for special treatment. We are asking for the same consideration you would give any species capable of standing before you and speaking for itself." The blue-skinned figure raised a hand, and the room quieted. "There is another matter the Council must address before considering your petition further. Reports have reached us of hostile encounters near your border territories, encounters your government has characterized as unprovoked attacks by another member species. Is this true?" I felt Whitfield stiffen beside me. This was the real reason we had come, buried under layers of diplomatic language. 3 of our scout ships, sent to chart the edges of known space, had been destroyed without warning, without communication, without any attempt at contact. The species responsible called themselves the Kethrani Dominion, and when Earth had raised the incident through every available channel, the response from the Council had been silence, followed eventually by a single dismissive statement calling it an internal matter between developing regions. "It is true," Malhotra said. 3 of our vessels, unarmed and on a peaceful survey mission, were destroyed by Dominion forces without provocation. We lost 43 crew members. We brought evidence of this to the Council 8 months ago, and received no formal response. The chamber went quiet in a different way now. Not amused silence, but something closer to discomfort. The kind of silence that comes when everyone in a room knows something uncomfortable is true, but nobody wants to be the one to say it out loud. The blue-skinned figure, who I now understood to be some kind of presiding chair for the session, glanced briefly toward a platform positioned closer to the center of the room, one occupied by a delegation whose armored uniforms and rigid posture told me exactly who they were before anyone spoke a name. Kethrani representatives, sitting close enough to power that their crimes had apparently not cost them their seat at this table. The matter you describe, the presiding chair said carefully, falls under jurisdiction still being reviewed. The Council does not rush to judgment on border disputes between developing regions. Border dispute, 43 of our people, gone, reduced to a border dispute. I watched Whitfield's hands curl into fists at her sides, though her face remained perfectly composed. I understood then, in that moment, exactly what kind of galaxy we had traveled so far to join. It was not a galaxy of justice. It was a galaxy of patience, endless patience. Patience that cost nothing to those who had it, and everything to those who did not. Your petition for provisional membership, the presiding chair continued, will be tabled for further review. The Council thanks Earth's representatives for their patience and wishes them safe travels home. Tabled. After everything, after the insult of the escort, after admitting on record that they had ignored the deaths of our people, we were simply being tabled, filed away, told to wait while they decided if we mattered enough to matter. Malhotra did not argue. She bowed her head, thanked the Council for their time, and led us out of the chamber with the same calm she had walked in with, though I noticed her hands were trembling slightly as we passed through the doors. Whitfield said nothing until we were back aboard the Reckoning, sealed inside her private quarters with only myself and Malhotra present. Then she let out a breath that seemed to carry the weight of everything she had been holding back. They knew, she said. They knew about the scout ships, and they said nothing. They let our people die and called it a border dispute. What do we do now? I asked. She turned to the small viewport in her quarters, looking out at the alien station stretching endlessly around us, a galaxy full of species who had decided, without ever truly meeting us, exactly how much we were worth. We wait, she said quietly. For now, we wait. But I do not think Earth is finished asking questions, and I do not think the Council is going to like the answers we eventually give them. That night, as the ship settled into its berth and most of the crew rotated through their rest cycles, I stayed on the bridge longer than my shift required, staring at the tactical display, replaying the meeting in my mind, every dismissive word, every laugh, every casual mention of our dead, as though they were a footnote in someone else's report. I did not know it then, but somewhere back on Earth, a message was already being drafted, one that would arrive on Whitfield's private terminal before the next ship's cycle began, carrying 2 words that would change everything that followed. Proceed as planned. I had no idea yet what those words meant, or what plan they referred to, but I would learn soon enough that Earth had never truly come to this galaxy asking for permission. We had come asking for recognition, and if recognition would not be given freely, then Earth intended to make sure it could never again be ignored. The Council had made its choice that day, tabling our petition, dismissing our dead, treating an entire species as an inconvenient formality to be filed away and forgotten. They believed patience cost them nothing. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The message arrived at 4 in the morning, ship time, and I only knew about it because Whitfield summoned me to her quarters before the rest of the crew had even begun to stir. She stood by her small desk, the glow of her terminal casting shadows across her face, and when she looked up at me, I saw something in her expression I had not seen before. Not anger, not fear, something closer to resolve, the kind that settles into a person once every other option has been stripped away. Read this, she said, turning the screen toward me. The message was short, encrypted through channels reserved for the highest levels of Earth's command structure. It came from the Joint Defense Council back home, the body responsible for coordinating humanity's military and diplomatic strategy across every colony and outpost we had established since leaving our solar system. 2 lines, nothing more. Petition status noted. Proceed as planned. What plan? I asked. Captain, when we left Earth, our orders were diplomatic. Petition for membership, gather intelligence on Council capabilities, return home. There was no contingency phase mentioned in my briefings. Whitfield sat down slowly, rubbing her eyes with the heel of her hand. There was a contingency. It just was not shared with the full crew, not until it became necessary. I have been carrying it since before we left Earth orbit. I waited, my patience worn thin from the day before, from the meeting, from the insult of that escort, from watching our dead get reduced to a filing category. When Earth first began building deep space vessels, she continued, our leadership understood something the rest of the galaxy has apparently forgotten. We understood that we were entering a universe with no guarantee of fairness. No promise that our voice would matter simply because we asked politely. So while our diplomats prepared petitions and speeches, our engineers and strategists prepared something else. Which is? A demonstration, she said. Not an attack, not aggression for its own sake. But if the Council refused to take our losses seriously, if they continued treating the deaths of our people as an internal matter, Earth authorized us to act independently to protect our colonies and send an unmistakable message about exactly how far humanity is willing to go to defend what belongs to us. I sat down across from her, processing what she had just told me. Humanity, cautious, careful, diplomatic humanity, had come here prepared the entire time to act alone if the Council failed us. I should have been unsettled by that. Instead, strangely, I felt something like relief. At least we had not come here naive. At least someone back home had understood exactly what kind of galaxy we were walking into. You said this before we ever left, I said. Before the escort, before the meeting, before any of it. Earth's intelligence services intercepted transmissions months ago, Whitfield said. Encrypted communications from Dominion Command, discussing our border colonies. They were not planning an isolated incident. The attack on our scout ships was reconnaissance, Elias, a test to see how we would respond, and more importantly, a test to see how the Council would respond. My stomach turned cold, and the Council failed that test. The Council failed that test spectacularly, she confirmed, which means the Dominion now believes they have permission to continue. Earth cannot allow that belief to stand unchallenged. I thought back to the chamber, to the presiding chair's careful, practiced dismissal of our dead as a border dispute, to the Kathrani delegation, sitting comfortably close to the center of power, while the deaths of 43 of our people were filed away without consequence. I thought about how easily they had done it, how casually, as though it cost them nothing at all. What exactly did the intercepted transmissions say? I asked. Whitfield pulled up a second file on her terminal, translated fragments of communication that Earth's cryptography teams had pieced together over the previous months. I read through them slowly, and with every line, the cold feeling in my stomach deepened into something closer to dread. The Dominion was not simply testing boundaries. They were planning a coordinated strike against 3 of Earth's outer colonies, settlements populated by families, by children, by people who had traveled further from home than any human beings in history, to build new lives on the edges of known space. The transmissions referred to these colonies using a term that translated roughly to acceptable clearing, language that stripped away any pretense of these being living, breathing communities, and reduced them instead to obstacles standing in the way of Dominion expansion. They believe the Council will look away again, Whitfield said quietly. Just as they looked away from the scout ships, the Dominion has learned that attacking humanity carries no consequence, because the species meant to hold them accountable would rather preserve peace on paper than protect the people that peace is supposed to serve. I set the terminal down, my hands unsteady in a way I was not proud of. How long do we have before this strike happens? Estimates suggest weeks, possibly less. Earth Command believes the Dominion has been waiting for confirmation that the Council will not intervene. Our petition, and its rejection today, may have just given them exactly the confirmation they were waiting for. The weight of that settled over me slowly. Our journey here, meant to secure recognition and protection through diplomatic means, had instead handed our enemies proof that no one was watching, that no one would stop them, that Earth's colonies were exactly as vulnerable as they had hoped. "What are our orders now?" I asked. Whitfield stood and walked to the viewport again, looking out at the alien station surrounding us, at the ships of 100 different species who had all, in their own way, decided that humanity's losses were not worth their attention. "Earth Command has authorized us to intercept," she said, "not to wait for Council permission, not to file another petition and hope someone eventually reads it. We are to position the reckoning at the edge of our colonized space and prevent this strike from happening, by whatever means necessary." "That is an act of war, Captain, against a species with a seat on the very council we just asked to join." "It is an act of defense," she corrected me, her voice hard now, all the careful diplomacy of the previous day gone from her tone. "A defense the council refused to provide. If protecting our people means acting without their blessing, then Earth is prepared to act without it." I thought about the families on those colonies, people who had left everything behind to build something new, trusting that the ships built to protect Earth's interests would be there if they were ever needed. I thought about the 43 crew members lost on our scout ships, whose deaths had been filed away as an internal matter. I thought about the Kethrani delegation sitting comfortably in that chamber, confident that their actions carried no consequences. "I am with you, Captain," I said. "Whatever this becomes, I am with you." She nodded, something like gratitude flickering across her face before it hardened back into resolve. "Gather the senior staff. We need to brief them before we set course. And Elias, once we leave this station, there is no quiet way back from this. The Council will know exactly what we have done, and they will not be pleased that we acted without their permission." "Let them be displeased," I said. "They had their chance to act. They chose silence instead." Within the hour, the senior staff had gathered in the briefing room, faces tired from a long day of diplomatic failure, now sharpening with a new kind of alertness, as Whitfield laid out the situation. Our tactical officer, a sharp-eyed young man named Owen Blake, was the first to speak once she finished. "Captain, if the Dominion intercepts our approach before we reach the colonies, we could be walking directly into the ambush we are trying to prevent. Their fleet strength in that region is not fully mapped. I am aware of the risk," Whitfield said. "But the alternative is doing nothing while 3 colonies full of our people wait for a strike no one back home can stop in time through diplomatic channels. We do not have the luxury of certainty. We have the responsibility to act." Our chief engineer, Marcus Bell, a quiet man who rarely spoke unless it mattered, raised a hand next. "The Reckoning was built for exactly this kind of mission, Captain. Every system on this ship, every weapon, every shield configuration, it was all designed with the assumption that one day we might need to stand alone against a numerically superior force. If Earth Command believed this day would come, then Earth Command built us to survive it." His words settled over the room, and I felt something shift among the crew, a collective understanding that this was not a reckless decision made in anger, but a moment that Earth had been quietly preparing for since before any of us had even boarded this ship. Our communications officer, Ellie Hart, spoke up next, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Captain, if we act without Council authorization, there is a strong possibility they will formally condemn Earth for the action, regardless of the reasoning behind it. We could be sacrificing any chance at future membership." Whitfield considered this for a long moment before answering. "Membership in a council that watches our people die and calls it an internal matter is not something Earth needs desperately enough to trade our colonies for it. If protecting our own people costs us their approval, then their approval was never worth having in the first place." No one argued after that. I watched the room settle into a quiet, focused determination, the kind that comes when a group of people finally understands not just what they are being asked to do, but why it matters enough to risk everything doing it. We set course within the hour, leaving Kethra 9 behind without formally notifying the station of our departure. I imagined the reaction once someone eventually noticed our absence, the confusion, the questions, perhaps even the beginning of concern, but by the time anyone in that chamber realized what Earth had chosen to do, we intended to already be exactly where we needed to be. As the Reckoning slipped into faster-than-light travel, leaving the crowded station and its indifferent council far behind, I found myself standing at the viewport in the corridor outside the bridge, watching the stars blur into streaks of light. Somewhere ahead of us, families were living their lives on colonies they believed were protected, unaware of the danger closing in around them. Somewhere behind us, a Dominion fleet was preparing to test whether the galaxy would let them get away with erasing those families entirely. And somewhere in between, humanity's first true warship carried a message we had traveled across the galaxy, still learning how to deliver. We had come asking for a seat at the table. We were leaving to prove we did not need one to defend what mattered most. I did not know then exactly what awaited us at the edge of our colonized space, how close we truly were to the confrontation that would define everything that came after. But I knew, standing there, watching those stars streak past, that whatever happened next would not be forgotten, not by the Dominion, and not by a council that had chosen silence when it mattered most. They had called our dead a border dispute. They were about to learn exactly what humanity does when someone threatens to make that dispute permanent. 3 days into our journey, Ellie Hart called me to the communications station, with an urgency in her voice that pulled me out of my quarters before I had even finished putting on my uniform jacket. "Elias, you need to hear this," she said, already pulling up a recording on her console. "We picked it up during our last scan of the outer relay network. It took our translation systems almost 6 hours to fully decode it, but I think we finally have something." I leaned over her shoulder as she played the intercepted transmission, a string of Dominion command chatter that had been bouncing between relay stations near the edge of our colonized space. The voices were clipped, efficient, entirely without emotion, the kind of tone that made my skin crawl more than any shouted threat could have. "Second wave confirmed for outer settlement clusters, designated Haven, Meridian, and Thistledown. Council response window has closed without intervention. Proceed with clearing operation on schedule." I felt my chest tighten as I listened to the names. Haven, Meridian, Thistledown. 3 colonies I had studied in briefing documents before we ever left Earth, each one home to thousands of people who had crossed unimaginable distances to build something new. Thistledown alone housed almost 12,000 residents, including a school system that had only just celebrated its first graduating class the previous year. "They are calling it a clearing operation," I said quietly, the words feeling wrong in my mouth even as I repeated them. "There is more," Hart said, her jaw tight. Later in the transmission, they reference confirmation that Council observers will not be present in the region during the operation window. Elias, this was not a guess on their part. Someone told them the Council would not be watching. I straightened up, my mind racing through the implications of what she had just said. "Are you suggesting someone inside the Council leaked our petition rejection to the Dominion?" "I am suggesting it is possible," she said carefully. "Or at the very least, the Dominion has enough understanding of Council patterns and priorities to know exactly when and where they can act without consequence. Either way, the result is the same. They believe they have a clear window to strike, and our petition being tabled yesterday only confirmed it for them." I brought the recording immediately to Whitfield, who listened to it twice through without saying a word, her expression growing more distant with each pass. When it finished, she sat in silence for a long moment before finally speaking. "How long until we reach Thistledown, our closest colony to Dominion territory?" "At current speed, 31 hours, I answered. "And the estimated timeline for their clearing operation?" Hart checked her notes. "The transmission suggests the operation window opens within the next 2 days. If our estimates are accurate, we may arrive with only hours to spare, assuming the Dominion does not move up their timeline." Whitfield closed her eyes briefly, and I could see her running through every possible calculation, every risk, every consequence of the decision she was about to make. When she opened them again, there was no hesitation left in her expression. "Increase speed to maximum sustainable. I want every system on this ship prepared for confrontation the moment we arrive. Elias, gather the senior staff again. We need a full tactical briefing, and I want contingencies for every scenario we can reasonably predict." The next several hours passed in a blur of preparation. Owen Blake worked with his tactical team to map out every known detail of Dominion fleet capabilities gathered from Earth's intelligence archives, while Marcus Bell and his engineering crew ran diagnostics on every weapon system and shield generator aboard the Reckoning, determined to ensure nothing would fail us when it mattered most. I found myself walking the corridors during a rare quiet moment, checking in with crew members preparing for what many of them understood, without needing to be told directly, might become the most consequential mission of their lives. I passed a young engineering technician named Ava Simmons, barely 2 years out of her training academy, carefully checking connections along a shield relay conduit with a focus so intense she did not notice me approaching until I spoke. "How are you holding up?" I asked. She looked up, startled, then settled into a small, nervous smile. "Honestly, Commander, I keep thinking about my little brother. He is about the same age as some of the kids on Thistledown. I keep thinking, what if this were him down there, waiting for help that might not come in time?" "That is exactly why we are going," I told her. "Because somewhere down there, someone's little brother, someone's daughter, someone's entire family is depending on people like you to make sure their conduit connections hold when it matters most." She nodded, straightening her shoulders slightly, and returned to her work with renewed focus. I continued down the corridor, feeling a strange mixture of pride and dread settling over me in equal measure. Pride, because I had never served alongside people more committed to protecting others than the crew surrounding me now. Dread, because I understood better than most exactly what we were walking into. Later that evening, ship time, Whitfield called me to her quarters once more, this time not for briefings or strategy, but simply to talk, something I sensed she needed as much as I did. "Do you ever wonder," she said, staring at a photograph on her desk, one showing her standing beside 2 young children I recognized as her niece and nephew, whether Earth made the right choice, building ships like this before we even had a seat at their table? Some people back home argued it made us look aggressive, prepared for war before we had even tried peace. I think, I said carefully, that the people who built this ship understood something the Council still does not. Peace only protects the people strong enough to enforce it, or lucky enough that no one ever tests it. Earth was never going to be lucky enough to avoid being tested. We simply chose not to be unprepared when the test came. She nodded slowly, setting the photograph down. My niece asked me before I left if I was scared. I told her no, because that is what you tell an 8-year-old. But the truth is, Elias, I am terrified. Not of dying, terrified that we might arrive too late, that despite everything, despite every system Marcus checked twice over, despite every calculation Owen ran, we might still watch that Dominion fleet reach Thistledown before we do. I did not have comforting words prepared, no confident promise that everything would work out exactly as planned. Instead, I offered her the only truth I had. Then we will not stop trying until every possibility has been exhausted. That is all any of us can promise, not certainty. Just refusal to give up before the outcome is decided. She managed a small, tired smile at that, the kind that carries more gratitude than words ever could. The following day brought new developments that shifted our understanding of the threat entirely. Hart intercepted a second transmission, this one revealing that the Dominion fleet assigned to the operation was larger than our initial intelligence had suggested, nearly double the ships we had originally prepared to counter. Owen Blake delivered this news to the senior staff with visible tension in his voice. "Captain, if these numbers are accurate, we are looking at a fleet of 12 warships, 3 of which match or exceed the Reckoning in size and armament. We would be entering this engagement significantly outnumbered." "Do we have any allies in the region?" Whitfield asked. "Any other human vessels within reach that could reinforce our position?" Blake shook his head. "The nearest reinforcement ship, the Endeavour, is currently stationed almost 60 hours away, too far to reach us before the Dominion's operation window opens. We would be entering this alone." The room fell silent, the weight of that reality settling over everyone present. 12 ships against 1, odds that, on paper, made our mission appear less like a defense and more like a sacrifice. Whitfield stood slowly, walking to the center of the briefing table, looking around at each member of her senior staff in turn before speaking. "I will not pretend these numbers do not concern me, but I will remind everyone in this room why the Reckoning was built the way it was. We were never designed to win through numbers. We were designed to win through resolve, through unpredictability, through refusing to fight the way our enemies expect us to fight. The Dominion has spent generations building doctrine around species that follow predictable rules of engagement. We are not those species. Marcus Bell spoke next, his quiet voice carrying more weight than his words alone would suggest. The Reckoning's shield harmonics were calibrated specifically to counter energy weapon patterns common among Council-aligned species, including the Dominion. Numerically, we may be outmatched. Tactically, we built this ship to survive exactly this scenario. I watched something shift in the room again, the same quiet resolve I had witnessed among the crew earlier, now spreading through the senior staff as well. Fear had not disappeared, but it had been folded into determination, transformed into something useful rather than paralyzing. We proceed as planned, Whitfield said finally. We reach Thistledown before that fleet does, and we ensure that whatever happens next, humanity's colonies remain standing, and the Dominion learns exactly what it costs to test us. As the briefing ended and the senior staff dispersed to their stations, I remained behind for a moment, staring at the tactical display showing our projected course, the small icon representing the Reckoning, steadily closing the distance toward Thistledown, toward Meridian, toward Haven, toward thousands of people who had no idea how close they had come to becoming nothing more than a footnote in someone else's clearing operation. I thought about the council chamber, about the presiding chair's careful dismissal, about the Kethrani delegation sitting comfortably close to power while our dead were filed away. I thought about how easily they had assumed silence would be humanity's answer to being ignored. They had no idea what was already speeding toward the edge of our colonized space, engines burning at maximum sustainable output, carrying a crew who understood exactly what was at stake and exactly what they were willing to do to protect it. The Council had chosen not to watch. Earth had chosen to act anyway. And somewhere ahead of us, a Dominion fleet was about to discover the difference between a species too new to matter and a species that had simply been waiting for a reason to prove otherwise. We dropped out of faster-than-light travel 11 hours ahead of the Dominion's projected arrival window, and for the first time since leaving Kethra 9, I allowed myself a single breath of relief before the reality of what came next settled back over me. Thistledown hung below us, a pale blue and green world with scattered clusters of light, marking its settlements, entirely unaware of how close it had come to disaster and how much closer it still remained. Whitfield ordered an immediate scan of the surrounding system, and within minutes, Owen Blake's voice cut through the bridge with the confirmation none of us wanted, but all of us expected. Captain, long-range sensors are picking up a large fleet formation entering the system boundary. Matching the signature profiles from our intercepted transmissions, I count 12 vessels, exactly as predicted. Time until they reach orbital range? Whitfield asked, her voice steady despite the tension visible in the set of her shoulders. At current speed, approximately 2 hours. 2 hours. 2 hours to position an entire defense strategy against a fleet 12 times our number, protecting a colony that had no idea how close danger had come. I felt my pulse quicken, not from fear exactly, but from the sharp, focused clarity that comes when a moment you have prepared for finally arrives. Hail the colony administration on Thistledown, Whitfield ordered. They need to know what is coming, and they need every available shelter system activated immediately. Hart worked quickly, establishing contact with the surprised and increasingly alarmed colony administrator, a woman whose voice cracked slightly as she absorbed the news that an armed fleet was less than 2 hours from her home. I listened as Whitfield calmly walked her through emergency protocols, her tone never wavering even as the administrators grew more frantic. "We will do everything in our power to prevent that fleet from reaching your colony," Whitfield told her, "but I need your people underground and sheltered regardless. Do not take chances on our success. Prepare as though we might fail, and trust us to prove you wrong." Once the call ended, Whitfield turned to the bridge crew, and I watched her transform in real time, from comforting voice to commanding officer, every trace of softness replaced by sharp, decisive focus. "Positioning," she said. "I want us between that fleet and the planet. Full stop. We do not retreat. We do not maneuver defensively. We hold this line." Marcus Bell's voice came through from engineering. "Shields at full capacity, Captain. Weapon systems primed and ready. Whatever they throw at us, we are prepared to answer. The next 2 hours passed with an unbearable, crawling slowness, every member of the crew locked into position, watching the tactical display as 12 alien vessels grew steadily closer, their formation tight and disciplined, the kind of formation built by commanders who had fought countless battles and expected to win this one with similar ease. When they finally entered engagement range, a transmission came through, translated instantly by our systems, into a voice as cold and flat as the one we had heard back at Kethra 9. Human vessel, you are interfering with a sanctioned Dominion operation. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Whitfield keyed the comm, her voice carrying none of the fear I knew she must have felt beneath her composure. This is Captain Nora Whitfield of the United Earthship Reckoning. The operation you refer to targets civilian settlements. We will not withdraw. Turn your fleet around now, and this confrontation ends without further consequence for either side. There was a pause, brief but heavy, before the Dominion voice returned, carrying something almost like amusement now. A single vessel believes it can halt 12. Your species remains as primitive in judgment as it is in age. Very well. Let this serve as the lesson your council failed to teach you. The first strike came without further warning, a barrage of energy fire lancing across the distance between the fleets, slamming into our forward shields with a force that rattled the entire bridge. I gripped my station as the ship shuddered, watching our shield integrity readout drop several percentage points in an instant. Shields holding at 92%, Bell reported, returning fire. What followed was unlike anything I had trained for in simulations, unlike anything our tactical projections had fully prepared me to experience. The reckoning moved with a speed and precision that seemed to genuinely surprise our attackers, weaving between incoming fire patterns in ways that Dominion doctrine, built around centuries of predictable, methodical warfare, simply had not accounted for. Owen Blake called out targeting solutions with rapid precision, our weapons systems responding faster than I had ever seen in training exercises, striking at the joints and weak points of enemy shield formations that our intelligence teams had spent months analyzing. One Dominion cruiser, caught off guard by an attack pattern that did not match anything in their tactical database, took a direct hit to its primary shield generator and spun away from the formation, venting atmosphere in a visible plume against the darkness of space. One down, Blake reported, though there was no triumph in his voice, only focused determination. 11 remaining. The battle stretched on, each moment feeling both impossibly long and impossibly brief, time losing meaning as the crew moved through their stations with a coordination that felt almost instinctive, every person aboard performing exactly the role they had trained for, exactly when it mattered most. I watched Ava Simmons's earlier nervous energy transform into something steady and sure as she worked alongside the rest of engineering to keep our shield harmonics adjusted in real time, countering enemy weapon patterns almost as quickly as the Dominion fleet could adapt them. A second wave of fire struck our port side, and this time the impact felt different, sharper, more concerning. Shields at 74%, Bell reported, his voice tighter now. They are adjusting their targeting to compensate for our shield harmonics. We may need to recalibrate. Do it, Whitfield ordered. Whatever adjustments you need, make them now. I watched the tactical display as 3 Dominion vessels broke away from the main formation, attempting to flank our position, clearly hoping to overwhelm us from multiple angles at once. Blake caught the maneuver almost immediately, calling out new coordinates to helm control. Captain, they are attempting to surround us. Recommend immediate repositioning to prevent flanking. Denied, Whitfield said, surprising everyone on the bridge, myself included. Hold position. If they want to surround us, let them commit to it fully. Elias, bring secondary weapon arrays online and prepare for a full spread pattern the moment they close that formation. I understood her reasoning almost immediately, admiration cutting through my tension even as I moved to comply with her orders. If the 3 flanking vessels committed fully to surrounding us, they would eventually cluster close enough together that a full spread pattern from our secondary weapons could strike multiple targets simultaneously, turning their attempted advantage into a vulnerability. The flanking vessels closed in exactly as predicted, confident in their numerical superiority, clustering tighter as they prepared to strike from 3 directions at once. Whitfield waited, her focus absolute, until the precise moment their formation reached its closest point. "Now," she said. "Full spread, all secondary arrays." The response was immediate and devastating in its precision, energy fire lancing outward in a coordinated pattern that struck all 3 vessels simultaneously, catching their shields at the exact moment they had clustered too closely together to properly disperse the combined impact. 2 of the 3 vessels immediately lost significant shield integrity, forced to break formation and retreat toward the rear of the fleet for emergency repairs. "That is a shift in momentum," Blake called out, something like genuine hope entering his voice for the first time since the engagement began. The remaining Dominion vessels, sensing the change in the battle's trajectory, adjusted their approach, becoming more cautious, less confident in the predictable, methodical tactics that had clearly failed them so far. I watched their formation loosen slightly, hesitation creeping into maneuvers that had begun the engagement with such disciplined certainty. "They are hesitating," I said, watching the pattern shift on our display. "They do not know how to fight an opponent who refuses to follow the rules they expected." "Then let us make sure that hesitation costs them everything," Whitfield said, calling out a new series of orders that sent the reckoning weaving through the remaining formation with a speed and unpredictability that continued to fracture the Dominion's coordination piece by piece. The engagement stretched on for nearly 40 minutes, each side trading strikes, each moment carrying the weight of thousands of lives waiting below on Thistledown, unaware of exactly how close the battle protecting them truly was. Our shields dipped dangerously low at several points, and I watched more than one crew member work through injuries and exhaustion without complaint, driven by an understanding of what failure would mean for the people counting on us. Finally, as our secondary strike disabled yet another Dominion vessel, something shifted in the enemy formation, a hesitation that spread from ship to ship until the remaining fleet began pulling back, their commander apparently unwilling to continue sacrificing vessels against an opponent who had proven far more capable and far more determined than their intelligence had suggested. "They are retreating," Blake confirmed, disbelief mixing with relief in his voice. "The Dominion fleet is breaking formation and withdrawing from the system." The bridge fell into a stunned, exhausted silence, the kind that comes after holding your breath for far too long and finally being allowed to release it. Whitfield remained standing at the center of the bridge, watching the retreating fleet on the display, her expression unreadable for a long moment before something like quiet, disbelieving relief finally settled across her features. "Confirm the colony is secure," she said finally, her voice hoarse from the tension of the last several hours. "And someone get me a status report on our crew. I want to know exactly what this victory cost us before we celebrate anything." I moved immediately to comply, already dreading the answer, already understanding that even in victory, a battle like this one rarely came without cost. Thistledown remained safe, its families sheltered but unharmed, its future secured for at least one more day. But somewhere below decks I already knew we would find the price that safety had demanded. The casualty report reached me 2 hours after the Dominion fleet withdrew, and I read it standing alone in the corridor outside Medical Bay, unable to bring myself to sit down while I absorbed what it told me. 6 crew members lost, 11 more injured, 3 of them seriously enough that our medical staff had spent the entire battle's aftermath working without rest to stabilize them. Among the names on that list was Ava Simmons, the young engineering technician who had told me about her little brother just days before the battle began, who had spoken of wanting to protect children like him on a colony she had never even visited. I stood there for a long time, reading her name over and over, remembering the nervous smile she had given me in that corridor, the quiet determination that had settled over her once she understood exactly why our mission mattered. She had died doing exactly what she believed in, protecting people she had never met, and there was a strange, painful comfort in knowing that, even as the loss of her carved something hollow into my chest. Whitfield found me there eventually, her own uniform still marked with the visible exhaustion of the last several hours, dark circles beneath her eyes that spoke of a battle fought not just against the Dominion, but against every doubt that comes with sending people you care about into danger and hoping, without any guarantee, that they come back. I read the list, she said quietly, standing beside me without further explanation needed. Ava Simmons, I said, my voice rough. She told me she kept thinking about her little brother, about protecting kids like him down there. Whitfield closed her eyes briefly. I approved every name on that crew roster personally before we left Earth. I told myself I was prepared for this possibility. I do not think anyone is ever truly prepared for it. We stood together in silence for a while, the weight of victory and loss settling side by side in a way that felt entirely appropriate, entirely honest. This was not the kind of triumph that belonged in a celebration. It was the kind that demanded remembrance, that asked something of everyone who survived it, a promise to carry forward the reason those 6 people had given everything in the first place. The colony administrator wants to speak with you, I told her eventually. She has been trying to reach the bridge for the last hour. Whitfield nodded, straightening her shoulders despite the exhaustion still evident in every line of her posture. Then let us go hear how many lives that cost of ours managed to save. The call connected moments later, and the colony administrator's face appeared on the bridge's main display, her expression a complicated mixture of relief and gratitude that seemed almost too large for words to properly hold. Behind her, I could see glimpses of the colony's central shelter, families beginning to emerge from underground protection now that the danger had passed, children running between adults who held them close, with the particular desperation of people who had genuinely believed, just hours earlier, that this might be the last time they held their children at all. Captain Whitfield, the administrator said, her voice thick with emotion, I do not know how to properly thank you and your crew. We owe you everything. Thistledown owes you everything. You owe us nothing beyond continuing to build the life you came out here to build, Whitfield replied gently. That is payment enough for people who gave everything to protect it. The administrator's expression shifted, understanding settling into her features. You lost people. I can see it in your face, Captain. I am so sorry. So am I, Whitfield said simply. But I would make the same choice again, every time, if it meant your people stayed safe. After the call ended, word of the engagement began spreading faster than any of us had anticipated, carried first through colony communication networks, then through relay stations that connected human territory to the wider galactic communication grid the Council itself relied upon. Within days, reports of the battle had reached far beyond our own borders, details of a single human vessel standing against 12 Dominion warships and emerging victorious, spreading through channels that had, until now, largely ignored humanity's existence entirely. Hart brought the first indication of this shift to Whitfield's attention nearly a week after the battle, her expression carrying a complicated mixture of concern and cautious satisfaction. Captain, we are picking up increased chatter across multiple relay networks. Other species are discussing the engagement. Some transmissions suggest genuine alarm at what a single human vessel accomplished against a numerically superior force. What kind of alarm? Whitfield asked. Hart pulled up several intercepted fragments, translated conversations from various trading posts and outposts scattered across neutral territory. Some species appear to be re-evaluating previous assessments of human capability. There are references to humanity possibly being more dangerous than previously understood. A few transmissions even use language suggesting concern about what might happen if humanity's full military capacity were ever fully mobilized. I felt a strange mixture of pride and unease settle over me as I absorbed this information. We had never intended to become something feared. We had only intended to protect our people when no one else would. But it seemed the galaxy, having spent so long dismissing us as primitive and inconsequential, was now recalculating exactly what humanity might be capable of, and that recalculation carried its own kind of weight, its own kind of consequence we had not fully anticipated. And the Council? Whitfield asked. Have they responded formally to what happened? Hart's expression grew more serious. Not yet, Captain, but given how quickly word has spread, I suspect that silence will not last much longer. She was right. 2 days later, as the Reckoning remained stationed near Thistledown, overseeing repair efforts and coordinating with colony administrators to reinforce their defense systems for any future threat, a priority transmission arrived, this one carrying the unmistakable formal seal of the Galactic Council itself. Whitfield opened the message alone in her quarters before summoning me and the rest of the senior staff to review it together. The message was formal, carefully worded, in the kind of diplomatic language that revealed as much through what it avoided saying as through what it stated directly. The Council requested Earth's formal presence at an emergency session to address what the message carefully described as recent developments requiring urgent clarification regarding humanity's military capabilities and intentions within Council territory. "They want answers," Owen Blake said, reading over the message with a slight frown. "After ignoring our petition, after dismissing our dead as a border dispute, now they want us to explain ourselves." "Of course they do," Whitfield said, something almost like grim satisfaction entering her voice. "We just demonstrated exactly the kind of consequence they spent our entire visit assuming humanity was incapable of delivering. They cannot ignore that, not when every species in that chamber is now asking the same questions we are being summoned to answer." I looked around the room at the senior staff, each of them carrying the visible exhaustion and quiet grief of the past week, but also something else, something that had not been present when we first left Earth, carrying nothing but a hopeful petition and careful diplomatic language. We were no longer arriving as supplicants, hoping to be granted a seat at someone else's table. We were arriving as a species that had just proven, decisively and unmistakably, exactly what it cost to underestimate us. "Prepare a course back to Kethra 9, Whitfield ordered. "It seems the Council is finally ready to have the conversation they refused to have with us the first time. Let us make sure this time they listen." As the crew moved to comply, I found myself thinking again of Ava Simmons, of the 5 other names on that casualty list, of the cost that had purchased this shift in how the galaxy now viewed us. Whatever recognition awaited us at that emergency session, whatever new respect or fear now colored the Council's perception of humanity, none of it would ever be worth the price we had paid to earn it. But it was a price we had paid regardless, and I intended to make certain that when we stood before that chamber again, every name lost at Thistledown would be remembered, not as a footnote filed away and forgotten, but as the reason humanity would never again allow itself to be dismissed. The chamber at Kethra 9 looked exactly as it had the first time we entered it, the same circular platforms, the same ranking system that placed the oldest civilizations closest to the center, the same faint hum of quiet conversation among delegates from a dozen different species. But the atmosphere had changed completely, and I felt that shift the moment we walked through the entrance doors. This time, no one laughed. Every platform we passed carried delegates who watched our procession, with expressions ranging from cautious curiosity to open unease, a stark contrast to the dismissive amusement that had greeted us during our first visit. Whispers followed us through the chamber, but they no longer carried the tone of mockery. They carried something closer to careful reassessment, the kind of attention given to something previously ignored and now impossible to overlook. Whitfield walked ahead of me with the same steady composure she had carried into every difficult moment of the past weeks, and beside her, Priya Malhotra moved with quiet confidence, her tablet held loosely at her side rather than clutched defensively against her chest, the way it had been during our first visit. I walked just behind them, aware of every eye tracking our movement, aware that this time, we were not simply another petition to be filed away. We were the reason this emergency session had been called in the first place. The presiding chair, the same tall, blue-skinned figure from our first visit, rose to address us, though his tone carried none of the weary patience he had displayed before. Instead, there was something careful in how he spoke now, the tone of someone choosing his words with far greater precision than he had previously believed necessary. "Representatives of Earth," he began, "the Council thanks you for responding promptly to this emergency session. Recent events have raised significant questions requiring urgent clarification, and we appreciate your willingness to address them directly." Malhotra stepped forward, her voice carrying the same calm clarity she had shown during our first visit, though now underlined with a confidence that had not been fully present before. "We are prepared to address any questions the Council has, though I would remind this chamber that Earth's actions at Thistledown were taken only after this Council failed to act on evidence we presented 8 months ago, evidence that was ultimately dismissed as an internal matter. A ripple moved through the chamber at that, murmurs rising from several platforms, and I noticed the Kethrani delegation, still seated near the center of the room, shifting uncomfortably under the sudden attention their species had drawn. The presiding chair raised a hand, quieting the murmurs before continuing. The Council acknowledges that the situation was not handled with appropriate urgency. However, Earth's response, engaging a fleet of 12 vessels without Council authorization, raises serious concerns about the precedent such unilateral action sets for future conflicts within Council territory. Whitfield stepped forward now, and I watched the entire chamber shift its attention toward her, delegates leaning forward on their platforms, clearly eager to hear how the captain of the vessel that had defeated an entire Dominion fleet would respond to this accusation. "With respect," she said, her voice steady and carrying easily across the chamber, "Earth did not set a precedent for unilateral action. This council set that precedent the moment it chose silence over accountability when presented with clear evidence of an unprovoked attack against our people. We did not act because we sought conflict. We acted because we understood that protecting our own colonies was a responsibility this council had already demonstrated it was unwilling to fulfill." The chamber fell into an uncomfortable silence, one that stretched long enough that I could see several delegates exchanging uneasy glances, clearly uncertain how to respond to an accusation delivered so directly, so unapologetically, in a chamber that had grown accustomed to careful diplomatic evasion rather than blunt honesty. A delegate from a species I did not immediately recognize, their platform positioned closer to the center than ours had been, rose to speak next, their translated voice carrying a note of genuine curiosity rather than hostility. "Captain Whitfield, if I may ask directly, how did a single vessel manage to defeat a fleet 12 times its number? Our own analysts have struggled to explain the tactical outcomes of that engagement." Whitfield considered the question for a moment before answering. "Because your analysts, like the Dominion commanders we faced, built their expectations around centuries of warfare governed by predictable rules developed among species who have spent generations avoiding direct conflict through careful diplomatic balance. Humanity has not had that luxury throughout its history. We have learned, often at great cost, that survival sometimes requires refusing to fight the way your enemies expect you to fight. That difference, more than any single weapon or shield configuration, is what allowed us to protect our people at Thistledown." I watched something shift across several platforms as she spoke, expressions shifting from cautious curiosity to something closer to genuine respect, the kind that comes not from fear alone, but from recognizing a capability that had been badly underestimated. The presiding chair spoke again, his tone noticeably more measured than before. "The Council recognizes that Earth's actions, while conducted without authorization, ultimately prevented significant loss of civilian life. In light of this, and in light of the clear failure of this Council to adequately respond to Earth's initial concerns, we are prepared to reconsider the terms of your petition for membership." I felt a flicker of something complicated at those words, not quite satisfaction, not quite relief. This was the recognition we had originally traveled here hoping to receive, offered now not out of genuine respect earned through diplomatic engagement, but out of fear, out of the sudden understanding that dismissing humanity carried consequences the Council had not previously anticipated. Malhotra stepped forward again, and I could see in her expression that she understood exactly what I was feeling and had prepared a response that addressed it directly. "Before this Council reconsiders our petition, there is something Earth needs this chamber to understand clearly. We did not come here today seeking membership because we require your approval to exist, or your protection to survive. We came originally hoping for partnership, for a chance to contribute to a galaxy we believed shared our commitment to protecting the vulnerable. What we found instead was a council more interested in preserving comfortable silence than confronting difficult truths." The chamber remained quiet, every delegate listening intently now, and I felt a swell of pride watching Malhotra continue, her voice growing stronger with each word. Earth is prepared to reconsider partnership with this council, but only if that partnership comes with genuine accountability, not the kind of accountability offered only after a demonstration of consequence becomes impossible to ignore. We do not want a seat at this table because you fear what happens if you deny us one. We want a seat at this table because you finally understand that the people of Earth and every colony we have built beyond our home world deserve the same protection and respect you would extend to any other member species, regardless of how recently we arrived among the stars. The presiding chair was silent for a long moment, and I watched him glance briefly toward the Kethrani delegation, whose representatives sat with notably less confidence than they had displayed during our first visit, clearly aware that the chamber's growing scrutiny was beginning to settle uncomfortably in their direction as well. The Council hears Earth's position clearly, the presiding chair finally said. We propose a formal review, not only of Earth's petition, but of the protocols governing how this Council responds to reported conflicts between member and non-member species. Earth's concerns regarding accountability will be given full consideration throughout this process. It was not everything we had hoped for when we first arrived at this chamber, but it was more than empty dismissal, more than a petition tabled and forgotten. It was the beginning of something that felt, for the first time since we had left Earth, like genuine acknowledgement rather than convenient avoidance. As the session drew toward its close, delegates began approaching our platform in ways that would have been unthinkable during our first visit, some offering careful words of respect, others simply studying us with the kind of curious attention given to something newly understood to matter. I watched Whitfield handle each interaction with the same steady composure she had carried throughout the entire ordeal, never boastful, never dismissive of the cost that had purchased this moment of recognition. Near the end of the session, as we prepared to leave the chamber, a delegate I did not recognize, representing a smaller species positioned near the outer edge of the room, much like we had been during our first visit, approached quietly, speaking in a voice too soft for the wider chamber to overhear. Your species reminds many of us why we originally hoped to build this council in the first place, she said, before it became more concerned with preserving comfortable order than protecting those who need protecting. Perhaps your presence here will remind others of that original purpose as well. Whitfield offered a small, genuine smile in response, the first I had seen from her since before the battle at Thistledown. That is exactly what we hope to contribute, if this council is willing to let us. As we left the chamber that day, I understood that whatever came next, whatever formal agreements or continued negotiations awaited Earth in the months ahead, something fundamental had already shifted. We had arrived at this galaxy as an unproven, dismissible newcomer. We were leaving as a species the entire chamber now understood could never again be safely ignored. The Council had learned, far later than it should have, exactly what happens when patience runs out and consequence finally arrives. Earth had not come seeking to prove a threat. We had come seeking recognition, and when that recognition was withheld, we had simply demonstrated, with painful and undeniable clarity, exactly what humanity was capable of when everything that mattered most stood at risk. 6 months passed before I found myself standing at the same viewport where this entire journey had truly begun, watching stars streak past as the reckoning cruised along a border that, not long ago, no one had bothered to protect at all. Earth's formal membership within the Galactic Council had been finalized 4 months earlier, following an extended review process that Malhotra had guided with the same careful precision she brought to everything she touched. The terms were not perfect, no negotiation involving so many competing interests ever truly is, but they included something that mattered more to me than any ceremonial title or symbolic seat within that chamber. They included a binding accountability framework, one that ensured no species could dismiss an attack against another member's territory as a mere internal matter ever again, not without triggering formal council intervention. It was not justice for the 43 crew members lost on our scout ships, or for Ava Simmons and the 5 others who gave everything defending Thistledown. Nothing could truly balance that scale, but it was something, a change that meant future losses, if they came, would never again be filed away and forgotten simply because the species suffering them had not yet earned the galaxy's attention. Whitfield had been promoted shortly after our return, now overseeing an expanded fleet of vessels built following the same principles that had carried the Reckoning through its defining battle, ships designed not for conquest, but for the kind of unpredictable, resolute defense that had proven so effective against an enemy who assumed humanity would follow rules we had never agreed to. I had taken command of the Reckoning myself, a promotion I still found difficult to fully accept, given everything the ship and its crew had already sacrificed to earn the respect it now carried across a dozen different star systems. The Kethrani Dominion, weakened both militarily and politically by the exposure of their planned attack, had entered into a fragile ceasefire with Earth, one closely monitored under the Council's new accountability framework. Diplomatic tensions remained, and I did not fully trust that peace would hold indefinitely, but for now, our colonies operated under a level of protection and oversight that had simply not existed before our journey to Kethra 9. Other species, ones who had barely acknowledged humanity's existence during our first visit to that chamber, now approached Earth's representatives with genuine interest in trade agreements, scientific collaboration, and mutual defense arrangements. I had read reports of delegations traveling to Earth itself, curious to understand firsthand the culture capable of producing both the diplomatic patience that had carried our initial petition and the fierce, unyielding resolve that had backed it up when patience alone proved insufficient. I thought often about something Malhotra had said during our final conversation before I took command of the Reckoning, a reflection that had stayed with me through every patrol, every diplomatic escort mission, every quiet moment since our return from Kethra 9. The galaxy did not fear us because we sought power, she had said. They came to respect us because we proved, without hesitation, exactly how far we would go to protect what matters most. That is not the same thing as aggression, Elias. It is the clearest kind of honesty a species can offer another. Here is what we value. Here is what we will defend. Decide for yourself whether that makes us an ally worth having or an adversary worth avoiding. Most species, it seemed, had ultimately chosen the former, though I suspected a healthy portion of that choice remained rooted in caution rather than genuine warmth. That was, I had come to accept, an acceptable foundation to build from. Respect earned through demonstrated resolve tended to prove far more durable than respect offered freely and without true understanding of what stood behind it. Standing at that viewport now, watching the familiar stars of Earth's expanding border territories stretch out before us, I found myself thinking about Ava Simmons again, as I often did during quiet moments like this one. I had made a point, in the months since Thistledown, of visiting her family personally, sharing with them exactly what her final days aboard the Reckoning had looked like, the quiet courage she had carried into every task, the determination that had settled over her once she understood exactly what our mission meant for people she would never meet. Her younger brother, the boy she had spoken of with such protective affection, had asked me during that visit whether I thought she would have considered the outcome worth what it cost. I had told him the truth, the only answer I genuinely believed. I told him that Ava had understood, better than most, that protecting people sometimes demands everything a person has to give, and that she had never once hesitated to give it, because she believed completely in the reason behind the sacrifice. He had nodded slowly, wiping his eyes, and told me he wanted to join Earth's defense fleet himself one day, to carry forward exactly the kind of protection his sister had given her life defending. I did not try to talk him out of it. I simply told him that if he chose that path, I hoped he would carry the same quiet courage she had shown, and that Earth would be fortunate to have him. A soft chime pulled me from my thoughts, and I turned to find Hart approaching, now serving as my communications officer aboard the Reckoning, carrying a data pad with a small, satisfied smile on her face. "Commander, thought you would want to see this personally," she said, handing me the pad. "Formal request from the Council for Earth to establish a permanent observer position on their Emergency Response Committee, specifically overseeing accountability enforcement for conflicts involving newer member species." I read through the request slowly, understanding immediately what it represented. Earth was not simply being included in the Council's structure anymore. We were being trusted to help protect other species from experiencing exactly what we had experienced: the dismissal, the delay, the convenient silence that had nearly cost us everything before we forced the galaxy to finally pay attention. "Send my formal recommendation for acceptance," I told her, "and Ellie, make sure whoever Earth appoints to that position understands exactly why this matters, not as an opportunity for influence or prestige, but as a responsibility we understand better than most species in that chamber ever will." She nodded, already moving to comply, and I turned back to the viewport, watching those familiar stars stretch endlessly ahead of us. The galaxy that had once looked at humanity with dismissive amusement now understood something it had been forced to learn far later than it should have. Earth had never wanted to be feared. We had wanted, from the very beginning, simply to be respected enough that our people, wherever they settled across the vast expanse of space, would never again have their safety treated as an afterthought, their lives reduced to nothing more than an internal matter too inconvenient to properly address. We had shown the galaxy exactly what happened when that respect was withheld too long, when patience finally reached its limit and consequence arrived in its place. And in the aftermath, something unexpected had grown from that painful demonstration, not fear alone, but the beginning of genuine partnership, built not on comfortable illusions of universal peace, but on honest, mutual understanding of exactly what each species involved was willing to protect, and exactly how far they were prepared to go in doing so. The Council had learned too late that humanity's patience, once exhausted, transformed into something the entire galaxy would remember. But in that painful lesson, something better had ultimately taken root, a partnership built on truth rather than convenient dismissal, a recognition that had cost more than any of us wished to pay, but had ultimately secured something worth every sacrifice made to achieve it. As the reckoning continued its patrol along the border that no one dared test carelessly anymore, I found myself thinking not of fear, or vengeance, or even pride in what we had accomplished, but simply of the quiet, steady hope that the price we had paid would ensure no other species, human or otherwise, would ever again have to learn that lesson the same painful way we had. The stars stretched endlessly ahead of us, and for the first time since this entire journey began, I found myself looking toward them not with uncertainty, but with the steady, quiet confidence of a species that had finally found its place among them, earned not through age or tradition, but through the simple, unwavering commitment to protect what mattered most, no matter the cost required to do so.